Tala Falava and welcome to the Global Pasifika Success Podcast. I'm Andrew Fa'avali, your host. Every week I'll be chatting with successful Pacific people from across the globe, unpacking their stories and more importantly, picking out insights, lessons and golden nuggets you can use to live your best life too. Thanks everyone for tuning in to the Global Pasifika Success Podcast. This week we have a good friend of mine, Apollo the Terminator Perelini. And Apollo is a dual international in rugby and rugby league. He's played rugby for the Manu Samoa and rugby league for the Toa Samoa. Was one of the early guys to switch codes and go over to the UK. Had a long, illustrious career both in playing and in coaching and strength and conditioning there, and has now landed and been in Dubai for the past 10 or so years, running his own business. So a man who has transitioned across sport and through that has gone into the administrative side and now into business, and that's why I really wanted to have him on board. AP, thanks for joining us, bro.
Oh, it's good to be part of this podcast. Thanks very much for having me.
Sweet, man. So we'll start at the top. You're in Dubai. Can you tell us about what you're doing there?
At the moment, I got two roles in Dubai. One, I own my own rugby academy. It's a sports academy. I can pretty much license to run any sporting academy if I wanted to. But I decided that about 10 years ago just to master one sport, and that's the sport that I love and are good at, and that's rugby. So we started in 2010. Our first academy. We were fully licensed, and we've been going 10 years this year. As we plan to celebrate our 10th year anniversary, it all goes lockdown.
What are you going to do? How are you going to have your big party?
Thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen. We're in lockdown, but it's been great. We've seen over thousands of kids come through our program, and over the years we've enabled kids to transition to their home countries. And I think that's been the main focus for us is to see boys and girls go and make it back in their home countries, but and enabling them to get the same type of coaching that they could get back home. So that's part of my business. And also out of that, we've also got a mentorship program. We help with kids and go through mental health. There's such a big mental health problem with kids, and also we're looking at leadership and going into corporate leadership as well. But that's my own business that we currently run. My wife is my boss. It's just my name that's on the door. My name's on the door, but she runs it. She does all the admin, and we have a few staff members that help along the way. And my other job is I'm a high performance director for UAE Rugby, and so that position is a government position. So the UAE Rugby is actually it's part owned by the general authorities, which is the government, and so my contract is a government contract. So my responsibility is to spread the game and teach the game to the indigenous people of Dubai, the Arabs. So that's been one of my main objectives. But the other one is the helping develop also the international representation of UAE Rugby in all competitions throughout Asia. So that's sevens rugby for girls and boys, men's, and 15s for men's.
So it feels like you're doing a few different things there, even though it's one thing, because sports development and leadership and business are all very intertwined things, but they really require different skill sets. How do you handle all those different skill sets that you need and the different hats that you need to wear?
Yeah, I think it's funny that when often people ask me that, do you wear different hats? I said, not necessarily. I think my coaching hat is still my leadership hat, and my leadership hat my coaching hat that I use when I'm out on the fields coaching and developing. It's the same hat that I use when I'm working in corporate. It's the same language, but we use we because all the transferable skills that and experiences that we have. I mean, and often I say, look, no one's walked in my shoes. None of these corporate guys have walked in my shoes, and experienced what I've experienced. So I'm able to relate, transfer, and give analogies from using metaphorically rugby and sports in general to get across, I guess, pictures and for corporate people to understand. So when I'm working with, say, a manager or a CEO, they understand it. They understand it because they kind of know sports. A majority of them know sports, and when you start painting the picture that, an organisation is just a sports team, just under a different banner. They have the same mantra. They kind of have the same goals to achieve and succeed, and they do go through the same failures as you do as a rugby team or any sports team. So. I try there's not very many hats that I wear, and I try and maintain. I guess the main important thing is just to maintain my integrity and everything that I do.
Awesome, man. Tell us about Dubai for those people who haven't been there. Obviously, we were living there together about 10 years ago, but for those who haven't been there, just give us a little bit of imagery about Dubai, what it's about, who inhabits it, and who are the main people that are attracted to Dubai.
Yeah, Dubai is it's kind of a very diverse sort of country. It's got more. It's so multicultural. It's unbelievable. And now, if I look across, it's mainly the Arabs. The locals of Dubai are Emiratis, and they govern and rule this country, and we always say that we're just visitors here, and there are don't quote me on any of the population statistics, but I think 3/4 of the population are all expats, and all visitors from all over the world, from Russia through all of Asia, Europe, to the US, and they've all come and established businesses here because it's quite a central hub to the Middle East and to Europe. It's very easy to get to Europe and Africa, Asia. All this region is quite is within touching distance, as opposed to being so far. Companies being so far apart. So Dubai is a nice trading hub for a lot of companies, and so. Here, a lot of people are here, basically residents are just visitors here. We don't have permanent residency. We only have visitors residency. And every year, every second year, we apply for our residency to stay here. So the application process is repeated every 2 years. And so in order to stay here, I'll be honest with you, there's no real unemployment here because you cannot live here without a job, and you cannot get a job without a visa, and we cannot get a visa without a job. So vice versa, you can't. And if you do overstay, you get caught and you get imprisoned, and it's tough out here. But the life out here is really good. The weather's great. I mean, it's starting to warm up. It's 38 degrees outside. It's a bit too warm for me. And a lot of people here feel safe here, and I think the picture that people think about the Middle East is that it's war torn, and there's a lot of conflict in the Middle East. Yes, there is, but where Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and Oman, this sort of region. This part of the region is quite safe, and I feel safe. It's a lovely place to live. It's so modern. It's Las Vegas on steroids.
Yeah. So, yeah, because people who I come into contact with here in Australia and New Zealand, they often think, "Oh man, is it a big desert? And Is it really strict in terms of Islamic law and stuff like that? Is there no drinking? And I think they've got the opposite of what actually happens. But the thing that I think about Dubai is that exactly what you said. If you're there, you have to have a high income to be able to support you, because there is no government support financially for especially for expats. And when I was there, and we were speaking to this just before, the rents were like $100,000.
It's come down. The market is the rental market is really good for us consumers, because what's happened over the last 5 years is that everybody's gone out, all the construction companies, real estate, and just built so many homes, and thinking, it's the old mentality of Dubai: we'll build it, you'll come.
Yeah, and that was the thing. It felt like whatever you thought you could actually make.
Yeah, exactly.
And what is it about that? Is it the attitude? Is it the financial abundance? Is it the fact that there was heaps of natural, like the oils there? Does it relate to a mindset?
I think it's the mindset. I think it's the mindset of people that are here, and also the mindset of the government. If they want to make something, they'll do it. And it's funny when I go back to Auckland, New Zealand, and sometimes I get there, and I've been away for a year, and construction on certain areas still haven't been completed. Here they build motorways. They put in a river that runs through from from one side of the city through into the desert and back out the other side of the city. And within 2 years, it's crazy when they can do it, and they can put up infrastructure very, very quickly. They've got a law here in construction that you get given 2 years. Once you've had the approval of building something, you've got 2 years to build it.
Wow.
Yeah. And if you fall outside of those 2 years, if you fall outside of those 2 years, you get fined. But if you complete it within the 2 years, you get a bonus.
Oh, sweet. So I think we need to change the laws in New Zealand, because the Takanini motorway, seriously, about 10 years when I don't know what's going on there, right? So you spoke about, no one's walked in your shoes. Can you try to put us in your shoes by taking us back? You were born in Samoa?
Yeah, I was born in Samoa, and we moved to New Zealand when I was very young, and went basically for a better life. And mum and dad were like all Polynesians, they took the risk of moving away from the comforts of home and from the comforts of family in Samoa, just to get a better life, to have a better start. And so we moved to Auckland, and with 8 kids, there's 8 of us kids, 4 boys, 4 girls, and we all did. We lived in New Lynn, and I went to Kelston Primary, Intermediate, and High School. So it was a major move for the family. Yeah.
So you grew up around some of the legends like Inga the Winger, Inga Tuingmala, and some other guys from Kelston. You want to just explain how you guys got into that group and how that kind of shaped the rest of your life?
Yeah, there was Kelston at the time. Kelston was, the big breeding ground of rugby players out west. Out of anywhere in the west. The Kelston area, the New Lynn, Kelston, Henderson area was a breeding ground for a lot of top rugby players back in those days. And I went to school with Inga when we went to primary school together. And I remember when he first started school, and we got to know each other, and we had such a gun primary school team. And then we went on to Kelston Intermediate, and then went on to Kelston Boys. But in that area, there was the Michael Jones, the Ronnie Clark. They were just up the road, only 5 kilometres up the road. So there was a nice breeding ground for the top rugby players around West Auckland.
So how did that shape you? Because I remember, Don Oliver was a big part of your life, and Don
Yeah.
Oliver was a former weightlifter.
Yeah, and he was a weightlifter for New Zealand and a Commonwealth Games gold medalist and an Olympic weightlifter. And Don Oliver, Inga and I got to know Don Oliver, and before we left to go to play rugby league in the early 90s, we got to know Don just through church. We went to a Christian fellowship in New Lynn and with Michael Jones and Ronnie Clark and so whenever we would come back from so when Inga and I would go to UK and we'll spend 9 months there and then come back home for a couple of months during the winter months, and we would come back and Don would always look after us. He would train us, and the crazy thing about Don is that he'd do everything with us, like with weightlifting. He'd teach us all. He taught us everything. He taught us how to squat properly, how to power cleanse. It was before power cleaning became something. It became part of any rugby players' training regime. We were doing power clean snatches with Don and his son.
Because, I remember, because I played low-level rugby in the UK, but I remember in our changing rooms and that there was a photo of you doing push-ups, and you were really well known for how hard you train. And then I saw it myself when I lived with you in Dubai when you were beating our academy kids. But how was your work ethic and that strong as mentality kind of formed? Was it in those kinds of places with Don Oliver and training on the weights and stuff?
I think my mentality came from being at home. I'll be honest with you, Mum and Dad weren't really rugby followers. They really didn't care much for rugby back in those days. It was kind of interfering with my schooling. It was interfering with our Samoan cultural life. And so for me, it was something that I got into my head that I really wanted to do it myself. And my dad was a really hard worker. He was a joiner by trade, but he worked in aluminium smelter just up the road in Avondale. And he used to walk everywhere. It doesn't matter, rain, hail, or shine, he used to walk everywhere. And I used to look at him and think, he's a hard-working man. I want to be like him. And that's what really, really modeled my beliefs in hard work, and just you can't wait for somebody to give it to you. You got to go out there and earn it. And just to give you a story about my father was about me is that all my uncles used to come and watch me play, and I remember I was captaining the Kelston First 15 in '87, and Dad only came to one game. He didn't really care. Hey? It was only because my uncle said, "Oh, you got to come down. He's the captain for Kelston First 15. They're going to win this." And he didn't really care. All he was worried about is that I get an education, become a better person, better than what he was. And then I remember one weekend, it was the finals, and I think we were playing against St. Peter's, and I was getting ready that morning to go to Kelston. We were meeting there, and then we were catching a minibus to Eden Park for the final. And my dad said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to go to school." He said, "Well, you haven't mowed the lawns." I said, "Silly, mow the lawns." He said, "You're not going anywhere until you finish the lawns, silly." And so, that was a crazy thing. It was the final. Guys, give me a chance there. No, there's no. And so I mowed the lawn, and back in those days we didn't have a catcher because the catcher of the lawnmower was broken. So I had to mow the lawns and then get the rake and the sanu and get all the grass together, and collect up all the grass, and that was a crazy thing about it. And it didn't matter to Dad whether I had the final or I was representing, Auckland or such. He was just more worried about my jobs and my responsibility around home. Then he finally let me go. I had to run to school. I was sweating in my number ones. And but the only other game that he ever came to, which was really was the biggest that I thanked him for, was Mum and Dad came to, was when I represented New Zealand and New Zealand under-21s in Sydney against Australia. We were curtain raiser to Australia versus France, and we were playing Australia at Sydney football stadium. And on that day, I didn't realise that Mum and Dad had travelled all the way to Sydney because my cousin paid for them, and they turned up to the game, and I was shocked. And I was in tears, and as I was warming up, and I looked up in the stadium, and there was my dad, and I guess he didn't care whether I was representing New Zealand or not. He was just more worried, that I was happy, and he told me that afterwards, after all those years, But I think the mindset for being strong came from my just watching my father and all the things that he went through in order to bring up kids in New Zealand and to bring them to transition across from Samoa. And I always believe that you can only never wait for handouts. You've got to go out there and earn it yourself. So my mentality of running was I do 10 to 12 Ks pretty much most days when I was growing up. I was always running. Inga wasn't so keen. I used to run past his house up Waikimiri Hill. He was going, what are you doing here? I said, come to pick you up. Nah, you'll go back in, and I'll just carry on. And it's I guess if it's ingrained in you, you just go for it, and it becomes part of you.
So you played in the New Zealand 21s. You made all those teams. Just a quick aside, who won the game between Custard and St. Peter's?
It's a draw.
Oh, what? So what, you shared the trophy?
Yeah, we shared it.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Who were some guys from St. Peter's at the time?
Pat Lamb.
Oh.
Pat Lamb. There's Pat, Matt Webber. There's, who else was there? There's quite a few, all those boys that growing up. I've forgotten most of those players.
So you played for the 21s, and then it was quite early that you decided to switch allegiance to Samoa. What was that like, and what was the thought process behind it? How did you make that decision?
They came about because of Peter Fats. May he rest in peace, the brother. I was playing at, so I was still at I was at Ponsonby. I was playing Ponsonby Seniors at the time, and Peter Fats the World Cup was coming around the following year, and this was in 1990. I was playing for. That's when I was playing for the under-20s, and Peter Fats got me in the corner and said at the club room, he said, he ain't never going to be an All Black. There's so many loose forwards. Come and play for Samoa. And I was like, oh, you know what? You may be right. And back then, all you wanted to do was just play international rugby. He just wanted to play national rugby, international rugby. And then he got me, Pat Lamb, Junior Paramore together and said, look, this is us, Danny Kaliopa. And so he got all of us loose forwards together and basically got us to agree on committing to Samoa. And so we did. And it was one of the best decisions I ever made, and I'll look back at it and think, what a great time I did, and that I had with representing Samoa. And so that's how we came to representing Samoa, because prior to that, I never represented Samoa. We're in New Zealand most of the time. But going back to my father, now this is the change of mindset for him. He was proud. I've never seen, he was so proud. The moment I said I was representing Samoa, it was a different kettle of fish for him. He just turned around and said, this is the best thing you've ever done.
I said, more about the lawn.
Yeah, yeah. This is better than all the lawn mowing we've done for our family. So that was probably one of the most proudest moments for him, that I was actually representing. It made me realise that no, Samoa, although he's living in New Zealand, Samoa is where his heart is, and it doesn't matter whether you represent the black jersey. He's not part of that black jersey. My dad was always part of the blue jersey. So when I finally put the blue jersey on, he was proud. I've never seen him so proud.
I think, we've had some really monumental Pacific teams come out and change the landscape and change the way the game has headed. I think one of those recently is the Mate Matonga, when Fifita and Jason Taumalolo, they switched over to MMT. And the whole fields are red, and it's ridiculous. I don't know why international governing body isn't like pushing this across the board, and as well as the World Rugby. But I think the 91 Manu Samoa team can say really confidently that you guys changed the game as well on an international scale. Huge underdogs, and to beat tier one nations was ridiculous. But also there was such pride in our people, whether they were in Samoa or New Zealand, Australia, the States, whatever. And I still remember it to this day, and that's what shaped me. And I wanted to play for the Manu, and I hadn't even been to Samoa yet, but I just thought, man, that was the new big goal. Yeah. It was never on the it was never in scope, but because what you guys did, it changed the whole game for many young people, and the legacy continues today. What was that like in 91?
Yeah, that was, I never anticipated, I never ever thought that what we were doing was going to make a difference. And it really didn't, at the time, I still in the back of my mind, growing up in New Zealand most of my life, that I still wanted that black jersey. And I still wanted that black jersey. So wearing that blue jersey, I felt pride to represent my Samoan heritage, but I didn't think that was going to have that kind of impact on our people. And so when we went to the World Cup, and remember those days, it was all faxes. We used to get faxes, and I remember the building up to our first game. We got hundreds and hundreds of faxes. Even the hotel in the UK that we were staying in London before we moved to Wales, their fax machine broke because all the families are faxing through their best wishes, and then the same problem happened in Wales when we finally got to Cardiff. And the amount of faxes that were coming through, and we wallpapered the whole meeting room with faxes, and we spend all afternoon just sitting there reading faxes. And I remember as a duty boy, I had to go and collect all the faxes from the office, and then you had to go and put them on the wall. I think I was there for 2 hours. It was I think it was me and Filippo saying I think they put it all on the walls, but as you're putting it up, your hair was standing on end. You're just so proud, to be Samoan, and that whole build-up before the first game was probably it was unreal, and I've never experienced that in my whole life of playing rugby. And then actually walking out onto Cardiff Arms Park and singing the national anthem on the Arms Park. And when you're growing up, you used to watch the All Blacks play on the Arms Park, used to watch Wales and Barbarians play on the Arms Park.
Moriarty's.
Yeah. And so to walk out on the Arms Park in Cardiff and sing the Samoan national anthem, honestly, it blew my mind. It was probably one of the most thrilling experiences I've ever had, and then to play the game. The game was all a blur. I can't remember any of it. It's funny. You kind of remember the kickoff and you remember the finish, but everything else, it's all a blur.
So, out of that, if we break it down a little bit, because this is a podcast about success, What do you think the elements of success for the team in 91 were, given that you're huge underdogs and conquered things that you weren't supposed to?
I think the element of success was belief in ourselves, and it's funny because we had no idea about Wales, and we kind of knew about them, but we were never worried about what they did. And what and Fats would always say, we go out there and and put our heart out on leave our hearts on the field, and I remember and the biggest thing was just to play for our families. Families played a big part. Families and our whole culture became a big part. We had guys like Mark Birtwistle, Stephen Bishop, and Matafa Keenan. You had your Frank Bunces. Now those guys had not come from a Samoan background. They didn't grow up in a Samoan community. But for them to actually be in tears as we sat there during local and have prayer together every morning and every night, and to sit there and sing songs and just be part of that culture. I think that culture really played a big part in our success, and having that culture that we're going to we'll die for each other. And there's a special there's a quote that Keneti Seal, who's now, I think he's sports minister in Samoa. Keneti Seal didn't get selected for that first game, and he turned to Frank Bunce and he said, and it's one that I still remember, and Frank still remembers, and he says it's a big part of his life when he thinks about his story. And Keneti Seal turned around knowing that he wasn't selected and that Frank Bunce was going to go out there and represent his country. Keneti's country. He's homegrown Samoan soil. And he said, in other words, if your heart is not complete, here, take mine, and then just to make it more complete. Wow. And then that was the day before the game. That was just before we go out there and do our team run before. And I was like going, man, that's it. That's it. That's, him saying that, if your heart is not, if your heart is not fully complete going out there, take mine and make it more complete. And that was the difference between that team. That team was so united, and the culture of togetherness that we were willing to die for each other, and we were so connected. And if you watch some of the games, I couldn't believe some of the skill sets that we had in that team. We were mud at lineouts and we were mud at scrums. I tell you, we were absolutely, we weren't getting pushed around at scrum time and we were losing lineout ball, but ball in hand. Oof. We just play off each other. It was that. It's almost like improvisational jazz, where somebody just plays something and you all just play along. You all improvise, and that's how we felt. When we played touch, we came off cues of people's movements. We got to know each other so well that it was almost like that's the only way I normally describe it as improvisational jazz. When somebody's got the ball, we all kind of just improvise to that person, and we just connect, and that was the difference. And like you said, success comes out of having a good culture, and that's our culture was tight. It was a family. It was about humility. We were very humble, in our wins. We will go back to the hotel and we'll give praise to our hotel people for looking after us. That's humility. Going back and thanking them for serving us dinner the night before. That's humility. So I think success comes out of having a good culture, and our culture was just believing in each other and working for each other.
So it sounds like the values of courage, You had pride in yourselves and your people. You had trust between each other. You know, you had humility as a key component of that. And I think about the Fiji Sevens.
Yeah.
And the Fiji Sevens, if you have a look at how much they're resourced, way less than the New Zealand Sevens, way less than Australia, way less than USA, etc. But they won the gold medal at the Olympics. And I'm not sure if you've read Ben Ryan's book. He was the coach.
Yeah.
The book called Seven's Heaven, I think. But it's just an awesome book on organizational culture and intertwining it with Fijian culture. And I just love what the Fijians are doing at the moment too. That, you know, even the league team, how they sing their hymn before the game, it's beautiful. And then the Chiefs have gone over there and sung the hymn, and different groups are singing the hymn. It just speaks to the importance of culture and how culture can really impact. And I think, you know, one of the stories for Ben Ryan is that he landed there, he got out his speed gates, and he turned the speed gates on, and he was bamboozled as to why the Fijians were bringing up such low times. I mean, they were really slow. He was like, he knew that their top speed was really amazing, but it just wasn't happening. And then I think it was the strength and conditioner. He was a local man, and he wanders over to Ben Ryan and he says, "Hey, you might want to make them chase each other." So he turns the speed gates off and he just puts them at a separate tree. and then they chase each other, and that's where he sees the top speed. But then the strength and conditioner coach comes over and he says, "Oh, now you might want to put a rugby ball in the front guys' hands and see what kind of speeds they get to." And the quote was that he said it was a synchronized explosion. And he showed that, you know, before he could do the exercise science and all the clinical stuff, he needed to understand the culture. And I think, you know, with you've got the mix up because you've been in the cultural space, and then you're a S&C at St. Helens Rugby League and things like that. So I think you're sitting in a good space there.
Yeah.
But, any comments about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's I guess it's the mentality. Island mentality is that, you know, if you ask them just to run on their own and try and get a fast time, you're thinking, why? You're right. You know. Remember when you're kids, and I remember and Ben's. I heard him speak, and he told that story, and I was just cracking up because I said, when you're a kid, you run the fastest when somebody's chasing you, eh? Yeah. When you're playing tag, man. When you're a tag, man, or you run the fastest when your dad's running after you in the gym.
You haven't done the lawns.
You haven't done the lawns. But, or your brother's, you know, trying to get you with a stick. But yeah, it is adapting to their culture, and that was the most important thing. And one of the lessons that when I talked to BG, Brian Williams, that he learned a lot on that tour. He learned a lot about the culture, that the way that people handle pressure, the way people prepare. You can't all prepare the same. And I think Graham Henry went through the same experiences with his Islanders. And it's funny when we talk about culture, and when I was at St. Helens, and I remember Dominic Fanati and Maury Fasavalu turned up, and they were unfit. They really, really struggled. And I remember when Daniel Anderson was coaching, and Maury was playing. We were in the final, and Daniel said to him, I don't know how to motivate this guy to get angry. He needs to get angry. So I went over to him and I sat down Maury, and I said to him, and I just told him that everybody thinks that you're a chicken. And he looked at me and he goes, what? I said, yeah, I know, everybody thinks you're a chicken. Daniel's lost faith in you. He thinks that you're pala'aimek. He thinks that you're a chicken. The change, the second half, he tore the opposition apart. He got player of the day, of the Challenge Cup final. And that was in front of 70,000 people. Everybody thought, mate, that guy just came out second half, because there's different motivation. You can't motivate Balis the same way, the Samoans the same way you motivate Islanders. And so all I did was just tell him that, and his pride. And his pride was affected. They think you're a chicken. What? You don't tell a Samoan that he's a chicken. So and so it's learning about cultures and the way people behave, and I think this is where I always think about the All Blacks and New Zealand teams. They really need somebody in there to be able to connect properly with the cultures of those Pacific Islanders. Yeah, and that's why it's key that you are surrounded by the Western mentality. You are surrounded by coaches who are being brought up, and coach just the Western world way. And there's no one really there that can connect to the Pacific Islands from a cultural perspective. That can help them on the field and off the field, and it's the reason why, I think Sonny Bill came out of it saying, he wasn't quite sure that, the PIs are really getting looked after in there, right?
Yeah, it's a surprise because, here in Australia, we've got Rennie, the coach, Cook Island coach, and we've got a Pacific coach before the New Zealand All Blacks. But, it'll be interesting to see. Damon said in this podcast, it'll be interesting to see also when we get administrators who are at the top, who are Pacific also. I just want to know, what about Dom? How did you motivate Dom? Dom's around here in Brisbane, lifting 1,000 kgs in his bench presses and his squats. Man, I guess what I'm saying about Dom is he's a massive man. You have to have trust before you can call someone a chicken, because I'll be too chicken to call Dom a chicken.
Well, Dom is very different. I think Dom is so when you approach Dom, it's knowing, and I always say that you've got to know people's personalities, and you've got to know how they think and sort of what their perspective is on the world. And whereas Murray is very different. He's a family man. He's very proud. So to call him a chicken, that really offended him. Whereas Dom is quite different. Dom, I would say, mate, we're really relying on you. He likes that being relied on. Dom's, he can go about just doing his own thing, But when Dom knows that he's been relied on, he comes out saying, "Okay, you need help. Okay, I'm coming to," and that's and Dom used to have some of Dom's best games was when I've gone up to him and said, "Bro, we really need you today." The team we really rely on you to go forward and be this dominant figure on the field. And you know what? And he comes out and absolutely just dominates. And that's and so it's, and I guess it's knowing where everybody ticks, and where one you push this information on them to say, you're pala, and the other one you say, come on, Dom, we need you. We need you. And so, and I think in leadership and coaching or in business, you got to know your workers. You got to know your people. You got to know your tribe. And if you don't know your tribe, how do you get them to function the way you want them to function?
And yeah, just a quick shout out to Dom and Pearl, because they're doing great things here, and they are working kind of to that. They're doing community work. They're helping in the community, and he's had a really good career after his footy. But talking about big dudes, you're a big dude naturally and physically. Obviously, you pump weights to do that. Then you were really aggressive on the tackle, and you earned yourself a nickname, the Terminator. What is it like carrying that mantle around, being the Terminator?
That's probably the hardest nickname to have when you go into rugby league, because then everybody wants to take your head off and they want to test themselves against the Terminator. And it wasn't. I mean, but the one thing I learned through growing up is that if you don't go for, and people always say, well, is it your technique? I said, well, yeah, the technique comes from not having fear of being hurt. Yeah, the moment you have fear of tackling, that's when you'll stop and your question, your decision making goes all erratic, thinking, should I be doing this, or should I be going up? And I think my whole decision making and tackling was always just go forward first and get as close as possible before he advances. And my objective wasn't to hurt the person; it was basically just to stop them before they get momentum on me. And so and I was always I'm not one to absorb tackles. I'd rather to go in and be the impact by moving forward and taking control of that area and taking away the space.
But, trying to articulate what you're doing kind of takes away the explosion in what you do. Because, even after your career and we were playing sevens in Dubai, I remember I had a guy and I had the guy lined up. Well, I thought I did anyway in my mind, but he came flying past and absolutely cut a dude in half. And if only we could show videos of this thing, it was an absolute explosion, and he stayed down and he got carried off and stuff like that. But when you're running to that guy or any of these big ass dudes who are running at you, what are you thinking?
But I think in most cases, when I see an opportunity to tackle somebody, I'd like to take them by surprise if they're not expecting me. They could be looking at you, but I could be coming from the left-hand side. He doesn't have no expectations of me at the moment, and all he's looking forward to is running into you. But then I come and connect with him. And look, there've been times when I've come up against some really big runners, and I remember in training, and I haven't told this story for ages, is in training at St. Helens when I was in my second year there, and a guy called Vila Matautia, and biggest Samoan, biggest thighs in the world, he had huge thighs, and he was he had just signed for St. Helens, and one of the training runs we were training, and the coach said, we're going to go live. And he was on the opposite side, and he would get the ball and just run through everybody. No one wanted to stop him. And then everybody says, come on, AP, get in front of Vila. And me and Vila had a pact, just don't run down my channel. We had made an agreement. Look, you run on that side, I'll run on this side. So as long as we avoid each other, we don't run it. And then one of the coaches says, I want you to go defend against Vila. And I said, no, okay. And Vila got this ball, and before he even started running, I was already off the line. I was off the line before he even, decided to run. And by the time he got the ball, I hammered him, and everybody was, roaring. And he got up and he goes, "Really?" And I just said, "Sorry, bro. I just had to stop you before you even start." and I guess my mentality is that get there before they even build momentum, in anything. And I guess that's what, for me, in life is get off the line. If I don't get off the line, I get left behind or I get in trouble. I'm in a vulnerable. I'll become vulnerable if you don't get off that line quick. And that's why, I guess it's my fear of being vulnerable in defence. That's the reason why I come off that line. And I can use that analogy in life and business. If you don't come off that line, if we still stay doing what we're doing, even if we come out of COVID the same way we went in, we really haven't learned anything. So, and that's why it's important for me, in everything I do is that I've got to come off that line. I can't be in that comfort zone all the time, or else I'm vulnerable getting hit backwards.
So when was the last time in life you felt like you kind of made a conscious decision to get off the line, whether it's in business or in even moving to Dubai? When was the last time you felt that?
Yeah, I think the moving. There was a time in 2009. Remember when everything hit, and I remember me and you were working. We were part of an academy here, the elite academy, rugby academy here in Dubai, and everything all folded. the businesses, our main sponsor, had pulled out, and we were in that position that we either bail out or we stick at it, and I was at that crossroads whether to go back to the UK. But I made a conscious decision to come out here and give it a go. And it had only been a year, and already we were struggling. And so I decided to get off the line. And I remember I was teaching at the school, at Brighton School, international school, and I was just a coach. So they hired me as a director of rugby. Within a year of being there, I'd become head of PE. And I didn't even have the qualifications to be a PE teacher. So, and within a year after that, I'd become a director of sports in charge of all the PE teachers. And here I was, and it's because of my decision just to get off the line, rather than thinking I'm just a rugby coach. No, I'm not. I've got so much to give. I've got other experiences, and that's why I always use, no one's walked in my shoes. And often people in the teaching industry often ask me when I was teaching at Repton, he goes, "What's it like working with civilians?" Especially coming from the industry that I've been part of. All of a sudden you go from running out in front of thousands and thousands of people where you're part of the entertainment business. You're just an entertainer as a rugby player. You're a commodity. That all of a sudden now you're teaching, and you're amongst kids and trying to impart learnings on these kids, and also trying to collaborate with teachers and at school. So moving off the line for me was back in 2009 was to really go for it and become a PE teacher, something that I've never done before, and then all of a sudden I became a head of PE of the whole school, to the director of sports of the whole school, and head of a faculty, and basically decided to build my own academy. And I was just moving forward and kept moving forward from there. And then in 2015, the UAE Rugby Federation approached me if I was interested in taking up a position within UAE Rugby as a part-time coach. And I said, yeah, I did. So I took up a part-time position, and then within 6 months they offered me a full-time position. And I felt that I'd probably reached the ceiling of what I can do within in the school, but I've had that experience. I didn't go any higher than my coaching. I kind of just operated laterally, and along the way I was able to collect a whole lot of new different skill sets from teaching. And Graham, man, I remember Graham Henry saying to me, after I told him that I'd become a teacher, he just laughed. He was my headmaster when I was at Kelston. He laughed when he found out that I become a teacher, and he said, "You know what? Everybody should do, at least every coach that wants to be a top coach should do 1 year of teaching. Should do 1 year of teaching within a school, because you'll learn so much, not just of how to teach, but also learn so much about yourself and how to be more empathetic about the way you deliver."
Because just to paint the picture, man, Repton, I know Repton because we were in the academy there, but Repton is a really expensive private school, and it actually originated out of England, and it's the school that Roald Dahl went to way back in the day. Yeah. I don't even know how old Roald Dahl was. They decided to create it in the Middle East, and they invested so much money because they had artificial turf on sand, and they had massive buildings, and outside that car park there were Maseratis, BMW X7s and X5s, like all these kinds of, it was like a car show there. You walked in, and we used to walk in as if like, whoa, what are we actually doing here? And then when I left, and then you went to the director, head of PE, and I was kind of cracking up, and then I would just shake my head and think, that's AP, man. He could go and he doesn't have the qualification, and then he could go and manage all the teachers, and do it with a smile. But that seems audacious. Were you ever nervous?
I think I was nervous because I think it was only my own personal self-doubt that I didn't have the qualifications to do what I was doing. But when I spoke to the head teacher, he says, "You got more qualifications than anybody here in life skills." And I started applying the same principles of coaching and building a team. And I built a really good, strong PE team of 17 PE teachers within Repton. And so I was able to apply those same principles and operate my PE staff as a team, at a squad. We all had roles and responsibilities. We all had objectives and that we wanted to reach. We all had goals. We had annual goals for us, but also at the same time, I guess although I had the role of Director of Sports, I had no problem of getting my hands dirty and getting in there and working in the grind. Most weekends I'll be coaching, and taking teams, school teams on a minibus heading up to Abu Dhabi on a cricket fixture, standing out there for 5 hours when I could be at home, But it was more. I was really empathetic in the way that I ran my group of teachers, and they really appreciated it. And I guess I was more human, and I didn't take my role too seriously. And I was all us. We like to have a laugh, and it was important that our environment was based around about fun and connecting and just enjoying each other's company. And I think that's, did I have fears? Of course I did. I always felt vulnerable that, you always think yourself, because you haven't got the qualification, I might get found out. But at the end of the day, you learn as you go along. And I learned a lot as a teacher. And I remember I had to take a class. There's a physics class, and I kind of it was part of sports science. It was part of our sports science group of year 12 and year 13. And fortunately, you have a textbook there. So I did the old bluff my way through a lesson, and I just opened up the textbook, put it on the overhead projector thing, and I said, "Yeah, okay, then start there." And I just played my way through, and I actually got the kids to do most of it. And it was a funny lesson because the reason why I remember it, because I got a lot of comments back from it. And I got the kids to actually come up with ideas on how this lesson should be done. And they were getting up and they were doing it. And then afterwards, the kids said that was one of the best lessons they had. And afterwards, when I was talking to the teachers, they goes, "What did you do in my class?" I said, "Well, I let them run it." And it's only that I realized that, independent learning is so important, and that, and all you're doing is just getting them to reach those objectives themselves, but as long as you can guide them. Even though I had no idea what I was teaching, I didn't need to know what I was teaching. All I needed to know is that, here's a bit of a roadmap. I want you now to find your way through. And they did it. They did it as a class, and they knew what they were wanting to achieve. They knew their goals, what they were wanting, where they need to go. I just needed to provide that roadmap, even though I didn't know the road.
So, when we're at the academy, and people won't know this for context, but actually getting a government job is a massive thing. It's really difficult to break into the Emirati culture, and because you've been coaching Emiratis or locals over there, you've obviously got their trust. But what I used to see at the academy was you were always speaking to the teachers. You knew how to network, and you knew that you were also a brand. And the Gary V's and the Frank Kearns and people like this are saying that you've got to have a brand, and you've got to understand that you as a person are you're a personal brand. So you were doing this in 42, eh?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, yeah, you say you're a brand, and hence the reason. I mean, if you're to look up my website, the academy is called Apollo Perelini Rugby Skills Academy. I didn't call it a Dubai Academy. I didn't call it an Elite Academy. I called it my name. And I felt you're right about branding. And at the end of the day, and I just decided that I give this Rugby Skills Academy my name, and make sure that my brand becomes part of that academy, and so that I guess it's trying to leave a legacy, and if it's like when you think about David Lloyd's. We think of David Lloyd's as a tennis player, but he now has gymnasiums and tennis clubs all over the world. And when people think about David Lloyd's, they think about that structure, that gym, even though they don't know the person, but they know the brand. My business is called Apollo Sporting Academy, and so it was really important that I gave it an identity. That I kept hold of my identity really, and that I was I'm a people's person, and relationships are really important to me, and I think in connecting, networking, and having those relationships are key. Even to this day, I mean, throughout COVID, throughout this whole lockdown period, I've been engaging. I'm still engaging with my students, my parents. I've created a COVID-19 community for all of my academy, and what we do is support each other. I post on there things of support, just videos of kids and performing trainings, and I think it's important that it is about building relationships and keeping those relationships and making that your Apollo is an approachable person that I can just come and talk to. And
so you were doing this with sponsors back at St. Helens and at Sail Sharks.
Yeah. I learned really early. A friend of mine who was a business owner, I think he was a lawyer, said to me, "Don't be the first to leave. Be the last to leave, and you'll get people wanting to be part of your network." And so, and I remember in 94, 95, I was going to dinners. We were going to St. Helens rugby dinners, and everybody was getting up after these dinners and just taking off to a bar or somewhere to drink. And I would sit there and just talk to all the different sponsors. And I ended up getting a Saab out of it. I got sponsors. I got a car sponsor. I got, various sponsors. And I guess, and people go, "Oh, gee, you've been schmoozing." And I said, "Well, no, just give me my time." That's all people want is just your time. They don't want, if they can help, people want to help. And one thing I found is that there are people want to help, and they want to help you, but you've got to engage with them in order for them to help you. And so what was important for me in the early part of my career is to engage with people. And it's not with an ulterior motive, it's just to engage. And I gained a lot of friendships that I still have right now. I still connect with them even during this time, and they're guys, they were fans of the game, they were fans of the team, and they wanted to support you by sponsoring you, but at the same time, you got a good relationship out of it.
That's awesome, because I think there's a lot of opportunity for current players to take that on board, especially because the large opportunity is there while they're playing. And then, like you've got these relationships that are going beyond your playing days and into business now. I guess the question for most is, if you are personal branding, because I've got a mentor who's told me to personal brand for ages, and to be honest, man, I've been fearful. And also, this podcast was meant to come out last year, as you know. and to be honest, I was too fearful to go and put myself out there. Who are you? You're not even successful, and you want to talk about. But actually, this is about success because I want to be successful.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. But the other side of personal branding is accountability and expectation. How do you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think one of the biggest, a friend of mine always says, look, if you keep your character, everything will look after itself. And I think it's important that the biggest part of me is making sure that I maintain good character, and accountability will all come as part of that, and a lot of that comes out of my faith, my Christian faith, in believing what I believe in, that you are always accountable to everybody. You're a representative of your faith, and the first, if you do something silly and you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing, and people look at you, you're supposed to be a brand, and not just a representative of your own brand, but you're also a representative of your faith, your family, and the friendships that you keep, and so and I think it's important that you're who you are, you're who you say you are. Sorry. You are who you say you are. It's no good saying, "Oh yeah, I'm Paulo Perelini, I'm all this, all that," and not be that. That's all. It's all fake news. It's Trump was saying. It's all fake news. This guy's an imposter. He's all fake news. And I think it's being genuine. Those are all characteristics that. It's funny. I was doing this. Superhero thing with some of the kids from my academy, and I said, if you're a superhero, who would you be, and the reason why? And people go, and so they wanted to know an example, and I said, well, I'm Iron Man. They said, why Iron Man? I said, because I'm just normal underneath all that armor. And I said, the armor is my family, my faith, and my humility. And they said, oh, okay. And I said, yeah, so without my armor, I'm vulnerable. Without my family, without my faith, and without my humility, I'm vulnerable. Vulnerable to criticism, vulnerable to attacks from all over the place. So I said to them, so find your superhero, and I always throw that up there to the kids in the academy, and I said the other thing about Iron Man is his suit. It's always improving. It's always improving. It never. It's always developing, and that's the most important thing that I always say. That you always got to be developing. You always got to be improving yourself. And I'm reading. I'll tell you this: I've never read any books, in my life apart from the Bible and apart from the odd book, John Grisham book. From January, I've read 11 books. I'm on my 12th. Yeah, and I just gave myself a goal. I wake up every morning at 4:30, and at 5 I start reading. So the way that I do it now, and I've decided, and it's part of just having that discipline of waking up early, and I wake up in the morning and I read an hour of the Bible. I read 3 books in the Old Testament and 1 book and a book. So I read a chapter every day from the Bible, and then I just do a little bit of study. And then I read another hour of a book. So I've read, Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, the Nike, Matthew Syed, Black Box Thinking. I'm on Richard Branson's book at the moment. But look at that mafia feel of this book. Look how thick this book is. But look, it's a great habit, and it's probably the best thing I've done. And I didn't. All I did was just made a decision to start reading. I was never one to read, and I keep telling these. I keep lying to myself, saying, "Oh yeah, I'm all right reader. I read on my phone. I read articles on my laptop." But to actually sit down and read books, and doing 11 books in just over 4 months has been a really big achievement for me, and I continue to do that, and it's very enjoyable and it's satisfying.
Awesome, man. We had this in Johnny Tapu's one. He said he doesn't read. But, I guess the thing is, it doesn't matter what it is, but whatever we think we can do, we can actually do despite our habits from the past, etc. You went from Auckland, you went across to St. Helens, you finished at Sale Sharks Rugby. You kind of conquered all that, went into strength and conditioning, and now you're in Dubai with a personally branded business. What is one learning that you've had from business, and then we'll kind of shut it down with just a few questions?
There's so many journeys, but I think the biggest learnings that I've had is not to be afraid of having a go, and I think that's the fear of the unknown is always the thing that holds a lot of people back. Look, I've learned to just go for it, and what I believe that what's the worst that could happen? What's the worst thing that can happen? I always look at the worst case scenario and then work from there. And I always say that worst case scenario, I go back to New Zealand. It's not too bad. Or I go back to the UK. It's not too bad. It's not to be afraid. And again, it's going back to coming off that line. Coming off that line. If I stay on that line and not move anywhere, then I'm liable to go backwards. And I've got to come off the line. I've got to come off line. I've got to move forward. Always got to move forward. And if I think about the business now, we're looking to advance ourselves. Even though during this time, people will look at it. I could have come into COVID and thought, "Oh crap! I'm in trouble now. Our business is shut indefinitely. We don't know when we're going to be opening up again. So we're not making money. We've lost money, but I'm not afraid of it because during this time we're working on new things and we're working on other projects where we've been working on developing our academy in a different way because I don't want our academy to be the same as it was before, and I don't want to be the same AP that went into COVID. I want to come out of this whole pandemic a different person, different business person with a different mindset, with different goals. And I think that the challenge is to stay focused on that and just not be afraid. Not be afraid. Go for it.
That's brilliant, man. And credit to your wife Selena too for going through and doing the decisions with you and being a part of that. Just for interest, who was your favorite coach?
Favorite coach is to be coached under? Yeah, it was a guy called Wyn Jones. He coached Ponsonby. He coached Kelston. He coached Kelston for 15, and he also coached Ponsonby afterwards. He was a Welsh coach. He was a Welsh PE teacher at Kelston, and he was one of my favourite coaches. And I think the reason why I really loved him is that he really cared. Really, really cared, and I think that's sometimes that's what's missing in a lot of people's coaching. And I learn a lot from coaches, good coaches. You always remember your bad ones. You remember your bad ones and your good ones. But one of my favorite coaches is a guy called Wyn Jones, and lovely man, and really cared for me when I was only 14.
Awesome, good on him. Where is he now? Yeah.
I don't know. I remember he was at Kelston. I met him when I went there 50th anniversary back in, I don't know, was it 2000? But it was, there's there's a few, and I remember, it's funny when you talk about, I was talking about this the other day with my wife, saying that when I was growing up, when I was playing for Ponsonby Kelston, because that was kind of the feeder to Ponsonby, but was located in Kelston. Because our parents, all the Islanders didn't have parents that come to the games. So all the Balangi parents would taxi all the Islanders around. And it was so funny because I said, I used to have this neighbour whose son used to play with us. And then the son stopped playing and the neighbour would still take us. the parents will still come and take us to the games. And she'll make us a packed lunch. Fill it up with cookies, sandwiches, take us to the games, because she knew that, the parents knew that we didn't have lifts. But even though the son was dropped out of rugby, the Palangi parents still took us, took and looked after us for years. Yeah, it's just unreal when I think about that experience.
What about a teammate? Who did you like strapping your boots on with?
There's a lot of good players that I enjoyed when I was at when I was at Ponsonby. I always enjoyed strapping my boots on with a guy called Daniel Manu. Do you remember Daniel Manu?
Yeah, played for Australia.
He played for Australia, and me and Dan, and I remember we played at Auckland together. And he came to Ponsonby. And when we left school, because he went to, I think he went to Marcelin College, and he came to Ponsonby. I managed to get him to Ponsonby, and we played against Marist, and he was marking Zinzan Brook, and I was marking Pat Lam, and we absolutely destroyed them on that day. And me and him had, and our number 8 was a guy called Ross Thompson, and he would, he was the white number 8, and then you had these 2 brownies on the edge of the scrum, and he used to call us his Rottweilers. He says, "Oh yeah, you're on my Rottweilers. I just unleash you onto Marist." And I used to love playing with Dan, and because whenever we went out there, we'd just go hunting, and we would enjoy each other's game and company on the field. And I guess it was the same when I played for Samoa. I enjoyed playing with Pat. Pat was he's very intelligent. He's an intelligent coach now, but he's an intelligent player. And Pat would always, he was my voice in my ear all the time. He was always talking to me. And anybody who's ever played with Pat Lam would agree that, he was the most vocal captain, but in a good way. He had very constructive and very technical in everything that he would talk about, and he would always talk to me on the field. And so that was one of the best guys I managed to lace boots alongside.
What about your most memorable game?
Most memorable game? I tell you the most memorable game, and I posted it on LinkedIn, and it's just been shown. It was shown in BBC 2 weeks ago. It was playing for St. Helens. It was a '96 Challenge Cup final, and and before the game, and I remember we were sitting in the night before. We were talking about processes and outcomes, and it's the first time I heard that term. This is '96, and the coach said to us, "Listen, I don't want you to focus on. I want you to forget the result. We're not playing for the cup. We're just going out there. We're going to play for each other, but we're going to play in processes. We're just going to think about the processes." And it made us write up the processes, our set of sixes, my roles and responsibility. I needed to take the ball up. We needed to get to the 50. If you divide up the pitch, left, the middle's 50, and then the far right is the 100%. So he said, get to the 50 and let's look for a kick, put the kick up. So, and that was our game plan. And we scored early, and then all of a sudden we were down by 17 points with about 20 minutes to go. And we ended up scoring 3 tries in a row with just from kicks via processes. But I remember we got scored against, and the reason why it's memorable is that the day before I prayed for the team. We said a prayer at our dinner when our meeting. The coach just said, "Oh, can you say a prayer?" And it was the first time he ever asked me to say a prayer. and then that morning, and I was reading from Psalms, and I remember, and I mentioned it at breakfast to a few of the players, and I said, "Look, I've just read from Psalms, and I forgot the passage now. I've got to look it up. And it says, for the Lord is just and will not forsake his saints.
The Saint Helen.
For the Lord is just and will not forsake his saints. That was the reading of that morning. Anyway, so we played the game, and we got 17 points behind with 20 minutes to go, and everybody's head kind of looked at each other. And they just scored, and we went to behind the post, and we looked at each other, and all in my mind was thinking, for the Lord is just and will not forsake his saints. And I was literally just quoting that scripture in my mind. And anyway, so we played, and within 2 minutes after that, because we were talking about processes, let's just get to the 50, we'll put a kick up, and we'll see what happens. We did exactly that. Put a kick up, we scored. We come back, kick off, get to the 50, we put a kick up, we scored. We scored 3 tries from kicks.
And you scored one, eh?
I scored the last one. Now, this is where, so we were still within a try. They could still get a try and win the game. And I remember Bobby saying, with 2 minutes to go, he turned around and he said, look, we need one more try just to put it out of reach. And I started praying. I said, God, if you want to try, can you do it through me? And it was the greatest comeback. It was the greatest ever comeback in a grand final. It was the greatest ever comeback, and I just got the ball, and then there it goes, and I went through and I scored a try, the final try of the game, with 2 minutes to go, and everybody just. But the reason why it was so memorable is that everybody was jumping on me. And was saying, praise the Lord, praise the Lord. Wow. These are all these heathens, man. It was,
That was cool.
and I guess that was really memorable because it had been 20 odd years since St. Helens had ever won the cup. And when we went back, the streets were lined, all the streets were lined with, fans, and we were on an open bus, and we went through the whole town for about 2.5 hours. We drove through the town, and it was unbelievable. It was one of the greatest experiences, and it was one of the best memories. And the reason why they are memories is because of the nature of the game, my faith within that game. It's all those little things that all made up that game that really made it so memorable for me.
It's amazing, man, because what cuts through your story is the prevalence of faith, but also counter that, the fear, like getting rid of fear and getting off the line and making sure that you've got your armor on and that you're not in a vulnerable position. And I just really love that, that's kind of underpinned and motivated you to live the life that you've lived. Not many people have transitioned out of footy or between codes and then into coaching and then into teaching and then into your own academy across the hemispheres and across the globe. And so what's the future hold for Apollo and Selena Perelini?
We're now just, like I said, we're now just working on other areas that we've been wanting to reach into is the corporate areas. Over the years, I've had so many corporate guys approach me to run some corporate leadership with them because of the nature of the way that I run. I run a coaching coaches course. It's my own. I wrote it a few years ago, and it was to. A lot of these coaching manuals, a lot of these coaching certificates that everybody does, it's all about what to coach, but what a lot of coaches don't get help with is how to coach it. It's all well and good knowing what to coach, but how to coach it, how to deliver it, and how to best deliver it, and so, and when I've run my coaches and when I've run through certain principles of coaching, a lot of my coaches are CEOs, general managers They're all top execs out here who coach on the side because their kids play rugby here. And so I've done over 300 coaches in this region, have done my course, and through that I've managed to just, get talking with a lot of these corporate guys, and they've always expressed, I love you to come and run a leadership, run a connectivity session, run a teamwork session, run a team player session. There's a difference between a teamwork and team player. What their roles and responsibilities are within. How do we connect? And so that's the area that I'm currently looking into and working on at the moment. Writing up programs, writing up systems that I can then implement into the corporate world. And it's been quite exciting because you learn a lot about yourself again. You branch into something that you haven't done before. Mm. But like I said in the start of our conversation, is that coaching is coaching. Mm. Coaching is coaching. You just alter your hat. Your hat is still the same, but you just alter, and the language that you use, but you just alter it to a different audience. And I'm now used to building high-performing teams. So why can't I build a high-performing organisation? So they all still run under the same principles, cultures, values, everything. They're all very similar to that of a rugby team. You use the same analogies and metaphors to for them to understand everything.
Getting the signature system.
Yeah. That's the one.
No, that's cool, man. Hey, thanks so much. Really appreciate the chat. We can't really do justice in terms of extracting all the gold out of your whole career, whether it was personal and family, whether it was migrating from Samoa to New Zealand, rugby league, business, and the future. But, we can always get you back on. I'm really looking forward to the next chapter for you guys. And taking all that you've learned into the corporate space. I think there's a lot to be taken there. And I've seen kind of some football players do it, but because of all the runs on the board, I think you're in a prime position to do it with mana and to do it in a really authentic way with experience in all those realms and across all those cultures and across all those countries. So I really appreciate your time, man. Thank you so much. Congratulations to yourself and Selena. Another big accomplishment we haven't talked about is that you've raised two awesome boys, men, Caleb and Noah. And so congratulations on being awesome parents, but also being awesome in so many other realms.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, man. It's really good to catch up and good to be on your show.